Hello, it's Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter here. I've just been watching a video. Every Friday, one of my favourite quilters, Cathy Martin of Cat Bird Quilts, has just uploaded a video related to her wanting to submit an entry into a quilting competition, and it's the first time she's submitted one. And if you haven't already seen that video, I'm going to put the details below. I recommend that you go and view it because she's taken an artist's perspective of creating her own design and is going to be submitting it for somebody else to judge. But it got me really thinking about what type of a quilter am I? And that might make you think, what type of quilter are you? And I've come to the conclusion I'm a bit of a rebel, so I think I'm a non-conformist. So come with me on a bit of a journey and we'll just have a bit of a chat, shall we? So I'm a quilter that likes making quilts for other people, and I make them as gifts. I've never bought, well, that's a lie. Back in the 70s, when Laura Ashley patchwork quilts were all the rage, and she was selling packs of hexagons. I did buy some hexagons at that point, and I sewed a few together and they sat in a bag for decades. Now that started me off with a love affair of Laura Ashley vintage fabrics, and at some point I'll show you my collection of fabrics there. But I've never actually bought a design pattern, and I've never sewn from a kit, a fabric kit. The idea to me of buying a kit and sewing it together doesn't appeal. It's not really me. If somebody bought me a kit and said, here's a gift, would you like to make it? I might say, oh, that's brilliant, thanks very much. Might not feel like me. And I've realised that when I'm thinking about making a quilt, there are a number of different factors that start me off, and that might be, I think of, I want to make a quilt for a certain person, so what type of fabric do I want for that person? What do I associate with that person, and what sort of design do I want to do? Or if you've seen my recycled fabrics on display, you'll see it's all sorts. So it might be a scrappy quilt, and it might be a colour block quilt, or I've got a charm pack, I want to work from this, or I've got this jelly roll, let me see what I can do with the jelly roll, and I'm using that as my challenge. But even when I've got a charm pack, I make up my own pattern. I make it up as I go along, and quite often I start out not knowing how I'm going to border, how I'm going to bind, what backing I'm going to put on, how I'm going to quilt it, what I'm going to trim it with. It's actually something that evolves. Now, does that make me an improvised quilter? Let me show you this one and see what you think. Would this come under the category of improv because I haven't followed a pattern or somebody else's design ideas? What do you think? Now, when I look at a colourway, so say I've done let's look at this wonky log cabin quilt. I've done it in a colourway of purples, but I've looked at all sorts of textures, colours, pattern designs, and brought them all together so that there's at least some cohesion, and the cohesion is in the colour theme. But somebody else might do a purple wonky log cabin. They won't be able to get the same fabrics as me because I brought them in charity shops, and I won't be able to replicate those fabrics. So is that a scrappy challenge? Is that a improv? I'm not quite sure. I don't think I like the idea of being told what to do. I think I've probably got the problem with that myself, which makes me a non-conformist. I don't know whether I'd be able to follow a quilt pattern because I've never seen one, in the same way that if I saw a knitting pattern, I might be able to follow it, because I did used to knit. If I saw a crochet pattern, it looks like a foreign language. You might as well be showing me a computer's binary code. I wouldn't have a clue what to do with it. And it might be that some of it comes from what I've inherited from my mum and my aunt that made their own clothes, made their own patterns. My mum used to make her own knitting patterns. The photograph I've got up here. Oh, I can't show it you. I'll show you. Now the twin set that my mum was wearing, she repeated that pattern in two colours. One was turquoise and one was peach. I'm going to show you some of the jumpers that she designed. Snowdrop jumper. Because she was a very good designer, but she didn't follow a pattern. She made it up as she went along. They fit perfectly. They suited her. They were in the colours that went with her clothes, other clothes, and it meant that she wore them, so she got really good wear out of them. So sometimes I look at a fabric and think, what do I want to do with that fabric? And sometimes I think, let me think about that person. Let me think what I want to make for them. Of course, the occasion makes a difference. For example, I've made a quilt for a 90th birthday of a lady that has sight difficulties. So I wanted a really vibrant quilt for her. The texture of the fabric made a difference. Or what if I was doing a small quilt for a child or for a cot? I'm going to be making some for teenagers for a charity soon. And I take the feel of the fabric into account, of how's it going to feel to that person and how's it going to look for that person. Are they going to be able to use it? Most of all, I want to create something that's going to be loved and used. I did make a comment on Cathy Martin's Cat Bird Quilts YouTube channel, and this was my comment. I said, you've done a design masterpiece. It was inspired by a work by Mark Rocco, and I put your design masterpiece is that, irrespective of the competition requirements, the submission acceptance, or objective or subjective judgment. And I'm going to talk now then a little bit about judgment. We all know whether we like or dislike something, and we all have our reasons for that. So what might be aesthetically pleasing to one person, somebody else might find, well, it jars, it's not quite me, I don't like the colours, I don't like the textures, I don't like the design. And it reminded me of the RHS shows and Judgement for that. The RHS is the Royal Horticultural Society in the UK, and you'll have seen that I went to the RHS show at Tatton, and they're famous worldwide for the Chelsea Flower Show. And one of my friends, when I worked in the garden centre, used to be an RHS judge, and we have village shows. We had one on the Wirral, and he invited me as a guest judge to join him when the village show was being held, and he was asked to judge the vegetable section. Well, I'm anybody's for a cup of tea and a piece of cake. So we went along, and it was a brilliant day out. Now, as he said, the simple things are, so if the category is 5 tomatoes on a plate, if there are less than 5 or more than 5, it was an instant fail. Where the requirements are that your green beans are 6 inches long and yours are only 5.5 inches, and oh yes, we took a tape measure, then straight away they were discounted. And then we were able to judge them. And very interestingly, we were looking at size, texture, smell, feel, weight, quality, and what was aesthetically pleasing. But I was able to say, oh, wow, that's the winning cabbage there. And he'd say to me, why is that? I said, well, A, for the size, it's stunning. The leaves are undamaged. The colour on the leaf is superb. It's soft at the edge, but really solid in the middle. It's a really good weight. I said, and it looks really nice. I would want to cut into that and eat it. So sometimes the aesthetics are as important as whether it meets the judging standards. So for something like Cathy's quilt, it might be that her quilt is an inch wider than the submission requirements, and it's got nothing to do with the quality of the stitching, the stitch length, how perfect her quilting is, the fact that she's got 30 fabrics, and believe me, she will make sure she's got a minimum of 30 fabrics in that quilt, because that was what the specifications were. Now, I don't particularly want anybody to judge me. I don't want anybody to look too closely. Has that line gone a bit wobbly? And I'm not really bothered about anybody else's opinion other than they just like it and love it and they're going to use it when it comes to my quilts. When we watch the RHS show from Chelsea, which is covered with the BBC coverage, very good coverage, on BBC One and BBC Two for the whole of the week at Chelsea, not only have the judges have been round and given their best in show, best show garden, you've got a gold award, you've got silver gilt, silver or bronze, or just thanks for coming. But then they hold it open to the People's Award. Now, don't forget, we're watching this through the medium of the television. So we're looking at what's aesthetically pleasing to us. We can't smell anything. We can't touch anything. We're struggling really with the dimensions because it's through a flat TV screen rather than the judges who are judging that garden, and they're standing on the garden. They're in a very different position to the viewer. But wouldn't it be interesting in these shows if not only we had a section that was traditional designs, a modern take, a scrappy, an improvised, an anything goes one. Wouldn't it be really interesting if they had a People's Award? And I can reckon that the People's Award will be one that the quilt has the most emotional impact. It might not be the best sewn. It might not be the tightest quilting or the most intricate or elaborate or, oh my goodness me, how on earth did they do that? And I'd ask myself the question, if I could buy one of these quilts, which one would I buy and want to take home with me? That's the quilt that would be my People's Choice Award. And I'd really like to see a category like that. So I think we need to be people's champions here and say, shall we have a section that's just the People's Award? And if we did, by the time she's finished it, I can bet you Cathy Martin would get quite a number of votes for her quilt. I think it's a masterpiece, I really do. So I'm going to show you some of my quilts. If I was entering this into a competition, where would it fit? I don't quite know. I'm in the middle of my Quilters I Go challenge and I'm coming towards the end of it now. Fortunately, it hasn't been one of my favourites. And I think as quilters, the most important thing is that we support each other as a community. We encourage each other as a community. It's fair, we can take criticism, but we like encouragement too, because we need to keep going. And don't forget, for those of us that are trying to quilt and do a video of it at the same time, that's not easy. That's a skill that we've all had to learn. Most things, we're amateurs in a domestic setting. So anyway, I hope you enjoy your quilting this weekend. I'm going back to mine now. So for now, this is Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter, saying bye for now. Come back and see me soon, won't you? Ta-da!